Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The title of our presentation today is Emotions Matter. I guess I should start off by asking how people are feeling. But I'm going to hold off on that just for a moment. So why are we here today? I think we're here today because we have a common belief or a common vision. First, that too many kids are being bullied. You heard from David the statistics that the stats are around 28% of children are experiencing bullying on a regular basis. We also know that the consequences of bullying are pretty severe. And I say that for all players involved in bullying. We often only think about the targets of bullying, but we also need to think about the kids who become bullies themselves. Also thinking about the bystanders. How many of you have witnessed bullying in your lives? And how many of you felt extremely uncomfortable by that experience? And how many of you felt like you didn't know exactly what to do about it? Yeah, so we need to teach skills, obviously, to all the players. And the third point that I want to make before I really begin is that what we now know is that bullying prevention programs are mostly ineffective. So the question is, why are we spending billions of dollars a year in our schools on approaches that don't seem to make a difference? What I hope that you learned today from my presentation is that if we take a whole school approach, or a whole district approach to teaching social and emotional learning, that there's more hope, that there are better possibilities for children. And interestingly enough, you get more than just less bullying in schools. What you get is children with greater well-being, teachers with less stress and burnout, more positive school climates, better academic performance, and the list goes on. So by taking seriously children's social and emotional development and the adults involved in their education, great things can happen. Let's just go back a little bit to defining bullying. So what we know is that there is normal aggression in life. Children will get angry, children will be mean, children fight. Normal fighting is quite healthy for child development. When we think about bullying, however, we're going into more detail. We're talking about intentional harm that's repeated and has a power imbalance. So by way of example, just about 6 months ago, I'm 44 years old, and I was one of those kids who was bullied for quite a while as a middle schooler. And luckily I got into the martial arts. Things improved for me. My parents got me help. But so I went sort of bully-free for maybe 25, 30 years. Recently, as an adult professional, I was at a meeting, and there was someone who is a little bigger than I am, a little bit stronger personality than I have. And the long story short was that I did a presentation on bullying, and I think this person might have been threatened by my presentation. And at the end of my presentation, decided to show a video of a kid being bullied by a coach. And of course, I'm looking at this video thinking, like, what is going on here? I don't get it. Like, what are you doing? And so I sit there, it happens, and at the end of the video, he goes, I just wanted to show that because that's what Mark looked like before he got his black belt. So here I was as a 44-year-old, literally regressed to being 13. Literally, I was sitting there, felt powerless. It was clearly intentional, and this person has a reputation of being a bully. It was only one experience for me, but what a strong experience, and how quickly I regressed to being that 13-year-old kid who felt powerless, who wasn't sure what to do. So what we know is that bullying has long-term effects on us. It doesn't just go away. It affects our psychological well-being for our lives. In recent statistics, we know that significant numbers of children report being bullied ever. 28% say they were bullied in the last 6 months. And between 7 and 15% say they're bullied chronically, chronic bullying. David presented these statistics, so I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but as you can see, it's pretty flat. That on average, there's lots of statistics, and it's a very complicated construct to measure, but on average, what we're seeing is around 25 to 30% of children experiencing bullying. So for me, I have the question is, why don't these programs work? And when you look at anti-bullying programs, what we learn is a few things. The first is that most really focus on the measuring or assessing the frequency. They look at rules. How do we create more rules? How do we monitor hotspots? How do we enforce consequences? Maybe they even institute zero-tolerance policies. And many of them even rely on bystanders. And that's becoming even, for me, a more interesting approach, this relying on bystanders. When I asked all of you earlier how many of you had witnessed bullying, many of you raised your hand. And then I asked all of you how many of you felt comfortable or capable as a kid of helping out the child who was being bullied. And what we now know is it's very complex. It's not such an easy phenomenon. I'm a very sensitive kid, or I was a sensitive kid. I'm hopefully a sensitive adult too. And for me to jump up and help a friend who's being bullied when I feel smaller, more inferior, would be very complicated. What I want to share with you today is why we believe most bullying prevention efforts are ineffective. And the first is that children are different. Each of us has a personality. And if you are that more timid, sensitive child, it's going to be really hard for you to stand in and stand up for the bully, or the victim, I should say. We also know is that child development matters. That our children's social, emotional, and cognitive development makes a difference in terms of the way we would help children manage bullying, the strategies that we use to teach them how to help out. So the third is that all players need to learn skills from our perspective. Bullying prevention is not just something for teaching or helping children who have been targets of bullying. Why are we not being prevention focused? Why are we not teaching children the skills they need to navigate their social and emotional lives? How many of you have witnessed, just for curiosity, adult bullying? Raise your hand. So look around the room, everyone. Keep your hands up. Nearly everyone. Just a few months ago, I did a webinar for a large company here in Connecticut, and I asked about 1,000 people about their experiences in bullying. And 70% of the people on that webinar said that they witness bullying on a regular basis in their workplace. This is adult bullying. Now, what we also know is that children learn by watching, don't they? And what we also have seen in our work is that many children feel like they can bully others in their school because they are watching adults being mean and cruel to other adults. Even in classrooms where there are assistant teachers, we've seen teachers bully the paraprofessional or the assistant teacher, and lo and behold, those children now bully other children and those assistant teachers. The final thing I want to say is that school climate and culture needs to be more positive. That until children feel, as we now know, safe, like they belong, they feel connected to their teachers, to their peers, to their community, likely the Common Core standards or any other national education reform effort is not going to have any impact. Kids have to want to be there. They have to want to learn. They have to have that desire to be in school. I think what we're coming back to is what Aristotle said millennia ago. And it's interesting. It's 2014, and finally, this is the first symposium that I've been at in Connecticut, and I've been here 11 years, where we're taking seriously the social and emotional education of children. So Aristotle said it, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all, and maybe the time has come. You heard briefly about our new center, where our center is called the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and the goal of our center is to use the power of emotional intelligence to create a more healthy, effective, and compassionate society. So it's a broad agenda. We want to help children and adults live healthier lives, both mentally, physically. We want to make sure that people are effective in their everyday lives, at work and at home and at school. And finally, how many of you believe that it would be a good thing for children to be kinder and adults to be more empathic? Yeah, good. We're on the same page. So we have a mission in order to achieve our vision, and that mission is to continuously conduct rigorous research, really unpack these experiences of children and adults, and also develop innovative educational approaches for schools and even other organizations, for people of all ages, preschool to high school to beyond, to teach them the skills they need to succeed. So I did say I was going to ask you how you're feeling, and now I'm going to do it. This is one of our tools, and we call it the mood meter. And the mood meter is an evidence-based tool to help build self-awareness, to build emotion vocabulary even. The mood meter has two axes, the pleasantness axis and the energy axis. I'm going to ask all of you now to think about this. Pleasantness has to do with what's going on for you here. It's your private, subjective experience. It is your feeling of being welcome or unwelcome, pleasant, unpleasant. +5 would mean that right now you're in the best possible place in your life. I mean, you could think of nothing else that you'd rather be doing than sitting here listening to some guy talk about feelings. Maybe some of you are there. I hope so. That would be +5. Some of you might be like smack in the middle, right? Sort of like most people in Connecticut when you ask them how they feel, right? How are you feeling? Yeah. No real language, no real experience. And some of you may be at -5. Maybe you're thinking, my goodness, like, this is a real waste of time. I could be, being productive right now. So I'm going to ask you right now to give yourself a number on that x-axis. How are you feeling here? Next, I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to your body, to your physicality, in terms of your physiology. How much energy do you have right now? -5 would mean that you are in the deepest pool of despair you've ever been in. You are so low energy that you are about to fall asleep. +5, you are just so activated and energetic you can't contain yourself. From the looks of the audience, I have a lot of work ahead of me. So what's your energy like right now? Low, moderate, high? And of course, the axes create 4 quadrants: the yellow, the blue, the red, the green. So yellow, pleasant with a lot of energy. How many of you are there right now? Okay, I'd say about a quarter of the room. How about green? You're pleasant, but low in energy. Okay, some more people. Anyone here not having such a great day in the blue or the red? So no one is feeling unpleasant. This is like on video, so we're like, we're going to talk about authenticity in a little while. Just for curiosity, if you were to do a little fly on the wall in your teacher's lounge at your school right now, or maybe in some of the classrooms in your school, might you see a different distribution? So all of you are fine, but everybody else is not doing so well. Yeah. What I'd like you to do right now is convert your plot to a word. What is the feeling word that best describes how you are doing right now? Take a moment. Freeze. Quick raise of hands. Just for curiosity, how many of you had some trouble finding the best word? Raise your hand. Put your hands up really high, like stretch it out. Look around the room, please. So we are all adults, and we, as adults, have difficulty putting a word to our feelings, a name. Any hypotheses about why that might be? This is the audience participation part. Yeah. Yes.
Because we are not usually talking about this kind of topic.
It's not something that comes up a lot. And if it does, what happens? If I say, how are you feeling? What do you normally say? Fine. Leave me alone. Any other thoughts about why we might not be able to access a word? Yes, sir?
Well, as adults, as we mature, we believe that we should be making less excuses for what we do in our lives. And we're supposed to be doers, not feelers. So it shouldn't matter how I'm feeling as to whether or not I can do my job or do what I'm supposed to be doing right now, or be a parent, or be, a coworker, or be a driver. It should be independent and immaterial. So we don't think about it a lot because it's not part of our daily equation as adults.
Interesting. And do you believe that?
No. My word was peaceful.
Okay, nice. I'm going to sort of wrap up this little piece by asking you to think about the strategy that's going to best serve you this morning. So I'll be on for about 5 hours talking about, a lot of feelings. Since we don't do it, we've got to spend a lot of time on it. What is the strategy that you will use to get the most out of this presentation? Honestly, as you feel it's Friday, right? You might say, oh, it's the weekend. What's your strategy to remain open? To maybe be a little skeptical, but stay open-minded and absorb as much as possible. Just take a moment and think about that strategy. Who can share? Who has a strategy? 2 people. See, our center really is going to do great work for this state. Yes. Yes.
To be aware of my body, to breathe, to sit tall.
Breathe, sit tall, eyes open, and be relaxed.
All of that to do with my body, to support my participation.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Yes.
My strategy is to think about the children in my school who need this kind of help. And so I'm going to try to take back as much as I can to disseminate it amongst the faculty and hopefully help kids.
Okay, thank you. How many of you have ever told a child something like this? I need you to pay attention. Anyone? Right. Maybe you've even used like symbols for it. Like if I needed you to pay attention, I would say like I need you to pay attention, right? And it's like look at me. Anyone ever do that? Or maybe use this hand signal and this sort of command, something like I need you to calm down, right? Be open, focus. What we've learned from our research and our practice is that those are complicated ideas, aren't they? How do you stay calm? Like, what do you do to stay calm? How do you focus? What do you actually do in your brain to focus? And I hope that you get a little bit more granular in terms of your understanding of emotions today. My hope is, by the way, is that you'll be right around there. I wanted to share before I move on, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I was in New York City working with some schools. And I had one of the most pleasant experiences of my career. I was in a pre-K room. And this little adorable preschooler, her name was Layla, and I was sitting on the carpet, and the teacher was doing a mood meter lesson. And the teacher said, Layla, do you want to share where you are on the mood meter? And she got up, and little kid like this big, and she pointed in the yellow. And then her teacher said, why are you in the yellow? And she looked at me like this little girl, and she goes, because the mood meter man is here. And it was like, wow. It's like, yeah, now I know my purpose in life. So why do we care about emotions? We care about emotions for 5 primary reasons. We care because we know from our research and others' research as well that emotions affect our attention, our memory, and our learning. If you were bored right now, you are elsewhere. If you're feeling a lot of anxiety about something going on in your home life, likely your brain is using strategies that may not be effective to help you deal with that, and you're not going to be as present as you could be. I can tell you myself, as someone who was that bullied kid as a teenager, who was extremely anxious in school because of fear of being hurt and all kinds of challenges, is I was not a great student. I couldn't focus. My brain was thinking, how am I going to get home without being hurt? How am I going to get to class B? And who's going to be my friend? Who's going to actually talk to me? Who's not going to make fun of me today? And when your brain is being used in that way, it's not going to have as many resources as it needs to be available for the learning experience. It's just clear. Decision-making and judgment. Just for curiosity, has anyone here ever made a bad decision? Yeah? No one wants to share that? Go back to your freshman year in college, maybe. So we won't do a pair share about that today. What we know from our research is that emotions drive much of our decision-making. As a matter of fact, among educators we've studied recently, their emotion states drive the way they grade their students. So we think, oh, I'm objective. But lo and behold, what we now know is that certain mood states bias the way you think about things. Relationship quality. For curiosity, how many of you sort of think about going for coffee with the colleague at your school or workplace who sort of is bitter, irritable, kind of disgruntled, and angry all the time? How many of you think like, wow, I wonder what they want to do for lunch today? Or how many of you sort of steer away from that person? We don't tend to like to be around people who display a lot of negative affect, who don't demonstrate their ability to manage their emotions effectively. Of course, our physical and mental health is affected by our emotional skills. If we can't regulate our emotions, how can we manage those feelings of nervousness or anxiety, even excitement? And finally, what we now know is that people just perform better when they have these skills, both at home, at school, and the workplace. So what is this thing called emotional intelligence? I was very fortunate in my career to have studied with one of the founders of the theory of emotional intelligence, Jack Mayer, and then come to Yale 11 years ago to work with Peter Salovey, the two originators of the theory of emotional intelligence. And they defined back in 1990 this theory, that emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. So what they're getting at here, or what they were getting at, was that emotional intelligence was this ability, this capacity, a skill, a competence. And it had discrete components of it. And what we've done for the last 10 or so years is really focus on what are those discrete components. The first is recognizing emotion. So I'm looking at all of your facial expressions right now, monitoring your facial expressions, and I am a little worried. It's just, some of you, I'm not sure what you're feeling. How many of you are somewhat interested? Okay, good. I was guessing that. I'm also monitoring my own emotional experiences. I'm checking my physiology. I am going with the thoughts, thinking about the pleasantness right now. The second is understanding emotions. Where are our emotions coming from? Why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I fearful? Why do I feel pride? And importantly, this component of emotional intelligence has to do with understanding how our emotions influence our thinking, our judgment, our decision making. And what we know from that research that I did with teachers recently was that their emotions affected their decision making, their judgment of their student work. But interestingly enough, 90% at the end of the study reported that they didn't believe that that was the case. So here what we're showing is that emotions influence how we think, the decisions we make, but we may not be aware of it. The third is labeling emotions, having that vocabulary to describe the full range. And what research now shows is that if you can name it, you can tame it. How many have ever lived with or nurtured a 2-year-old who didn't have a sophisticated vocabulary yet? It's challenging, isn't it? If you can't name your feelings, it's very hard to know what to do with them. Expressing emotions, knowing the how and when to express emotions. This is a room filled with people from a variety of cultures. How many of you work with students who are from other cultures? Raise your hand. Almost everyone. How many of you notice there are different rules associated with emotions based on these cultures? Yes, they are. So we need to be mindful of that the Korean child in the class who's looking down and is being deferent is not ignoring you or dismissing you, that it's based on his cultural heritage. The fifth is regulating emotions. What are those strategies that we use to manage our emotions effectively? How many of you, just for curiosity, believe that your lives would be somewhat more healthy and you'd be maybe even a little happier if you were more skilled at regulating your own emotions? Raise your hand. Okay. Some of you, many of you. How many of you feel like your lives would be better if everybody who you live with had more strategies? Yeah. So that's a challenge, right? It's a very American way. We want everyone else to do the work. You see on the bottom here that we assert that it's not just about the skills, but it's about attitudes and knowledge. A big part of our work is convincing the world that emotions matter, that a child's emotion skills will make a difference in his life or her life, that teachers who are more aware of the emotional displays that they are having in their classrooms are going to be more successful, that leaders who are more emotionally skilled will make a difference. So you have to have the belief system that emotions matter. Otherwise, you just focus on other things, don't you? Then you have to develop knowledge. You have to learn about emotions. And you can get a Ph.D. in just one emotion. So this is a big field. And then you have to develop the skills of practicing and getting feedback so that you become more adept. We've also focused on ways of measuring emotional intelligence. You can ask the person, I'm curious to know how emotionally intelligent this audience is. So on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 you are not very emotionally intelligent, 5 you are an emotional genius. How many of you give yourselves a 1? Okay, no emotional basket cases here. How about a 2? Okay, very select group of people. How about a 3? About 10%. How many of you give yourselves a 4? Raise your hands high. 4s, raise your hands. So about 80% of the room. How many of you believe that 80% of the room is above average? The people who raise their hand. So when we do these studies on pen and paper with students, what we find is that just the same thing. 80% of the students think they're more emotionally intelligent than the other 80%. Anybody studying math? It doesn't work out very well. So self-report doesn't really work. I can ask everybody who you know how emotionally intelligent they think you are. How many of you would like to rely on your significant other's report of your emotional intelligence? How many of you would like to rely on your student's report of your emotional intelligence? So asking others is tricky, and the way we focus the measurement of emotional intelligence is using performance assessment tools. What do you actually know, and what can you do with your emotions? So we give people facial expressions to decode. We give them scenarios that they have to problem solve about. And when we do that, we find pretty interesting things. Part of this, right, is self-knowledge is quite limited. How much feedback have you gotten on your emotional intelligence in life? Seriously. How much formal training have you received on the abilities of recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, regulating emotions? For those of you who went to become a teacher, how many of you, or anybody, in your undergraduate years, how many of you had a course that really got you into this skill set? 2 people. It's just not part of our culture. It was only defined in 1990, right? I want to share with you some of the research. We've measured just tens of thousands of children and adults' emotional intelligence, and here's what we know. That students with greater emotional intelligence have less anxiety, they have less depression, they're less likely to abuse drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes, less likely to be aggressive and bully others. So here we are showing that these emotion skills are making a difference in multiple aspects of children's lives. And it goes on. They have greater leadership skills. They are more attentive and less hyperactive in school, and they also perform better academically. We know this also about teachers. Teachers with greater emotional intelligence are just generally more positive about teaching in their schools. They receive more support from their principals. They report greater job satisfaction and less burnout. One thing that we've done a lot of in the last few years is move beyond the study of the emotional intelligence of the individual and start studying what does it look like to have an emotionally intelligent classroom. How do you go into a classroom and videotape, for example, the interactions between teachers and students and among students themselves, and look for the behaviors associated with emotional intelligence, like positive nonverbal behavior while teaching, like a teacher who regards students' perspectives, is sensitive to students' needs, not so cynical. And when we code the interactions between teachers and students, what we find is that you can rate an emotional climate. You can also do other things like the instructional skills and the classroom organizational components. However, what we find is that the emotional climate is the most predictive. It's the most predictive of things like students being engaged in learning. It's the most predictive of students having better quality relationships with their teachers and less aggressive behavior, more pro-social behavior, and importantly, higher academic performance. And in these studies, we're not just coding for these climates, we're also looking at classroom size, teacher education level, school size, socioeconomic status. All of these things are controlled in these studies, and over again, what we're finding is that emotional climate makes the difference. When you go into the workforce, guess what? Managers and leaders with higher emotional intelligence just do better. From having greater sensitivity and empathy to being more effective to getting more merit increases, higher performance ratings, teams have faster cohesion, support each other better, communicate more effectively, perform better. And CEOs even say about their employees with greater emotional intelligence, these are the people that I want to be around, these are the people I want to be with me. Everybody asks, how does emotional intelligence develop? And of course, it develops through a variety of mechanisms. Some of us are just more naturally emotionally intelligent. Our area of our brains that are associated with reading people has more neurons. So you're looking around constantly, you're getting information from the world around us. There's also the temperament piece, isn't there? How many of you are just more prone to be worried and anxious? Anyone? Be honest, it's okay. I'm that person. So I worry a lot. I took pictures, I'm thinking, the senator, God, I feel so short. I can never be a politician. It's like, I'm worried about that. And then people from the Department of Education, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm just a psychologist. And then I'm thinking last night, what am I going to say to these people? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And I say, I got to talk to myself and say, you've done 1 million presentations, you're going to be fine. And then I start worrying about why I'm worrying. And it's just sort of like this genetic thing. Luckily, I have skills. Luckily, I can check in and say, all right, how you feeling? All right, really, how you feeling? And of course, we have nurture, don't we? We have the people that raised us. And probably their emotional intelligence influenced our emotional intelligence. So, I always say I grew up with a very neurotic mother, go figure my anxiety. And my mother would say something like this when I was a teenager, Mark, I'm having a breakdown, right? And I remember thinking, I'm 12, Mom, I'm not sure I'm the person that's going to help you. But, maybe we can talk about it. And my father was this kind of, angry man. I mean, he was a good father. My parents were good, but my father had some anger issues, and there would be those arguing all the time, and so this is what you learn, you learn, for example, while my mother was a loving mother, I learned that she was a little bit of an avoider. So when I was bullied as a kid, it would be things like, don't worry, it's going to go away. Your parents love you. And I was like, but I need skills, I didn't say that back then. I say that now. Love is wonderful. I feel so supported here, but when I'm in this environment, love is not helping me. I need some real skills to help me get through this day and to figure out how to manage my life. So what I hope happens is that we give everybody these skills from preschool to high school and beyond so that we can ensure that everyone gets a developmentally appropriate emotional intelligence education. So why are we here? Because I hope that we agree that there are not enough concrete tools available to schools and to families to teach these skills. So what I want to wrap up my presentation with is sharing with you some of the tools that we've developed and their impact. Ruler is a program that was developed in our center. It has been in existence for many, many years. I was very fortunate in my career, and one of the reasons why I survived being a teenager who was bullied was because I had an uncle who was a magnificent educator. And so I owe my career to my uncle, who was a middle school teacher, who essentially was the one that gave me the words, who gave me the strategies, because he knew better, somehow or another. And when I was in my early 20s, I decided to work with my uncle on a project to develop emotional intelligence among middle schoolers. And we worked together, the blind leading the blind, in terms of writing a program, because he was a retired teacher. I was just going to get my graduate work done. And we just struggled trying to put together a program. And we got a few people to use it, and it didn't work. And we realized that we had challenges, because we were asking teachers back 20 years ago to teach concepts like alienation, anxiety. And what we found was there was a lot of resistance. I'm not comfortable talking about alienation, anxiety. So we had to go back to the drawing board and develop the adults. We had to teach teachers to be more emotionally skilled themselves. But then we went into schools and superintendents and principals would be distracted, their BlackBerries running around saying, oh, we're going to do this training for our faculty. They really need it. Like, well, the way you just did it with your hand, I think you really need it, just like. So we had to really work with the leaders of schools so they walk the talk. And that's why it says it involves all stakeholders, because from our perspective, everyone at a school who works in a school, from an administrative assistant who is greeting people in the morning to transportation staff who are seeing kids on the bus. A lot of bullying happens on the bus. What if the bus driver were to check kids off on the mood meter as the kids were getting on the bus and be able to read those expressions and say, wow, what's going on? How different would that be? Focus on positive development. We believe it's an umbrella for all the work that's being done in character education and bullying, etc. Has to align with Common Core standards, as you now know. We also want to make sure we're promoting teacher effectiveness and creating a positive school climate. And importantly, it can't be something that's done on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Let's talk about feelings. Okay, good. Open up page 357. We're going to go into math now. That's not feelings are everywhere in school, aren't they? Think about the day in the life of a student, from 7 a.m. till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, in and out of classrooms, lunchroom, recess, physical education, feedback on their grades, endless experiences. So what are these anchors? The first is called the Emotional Intelligence Charter. We believe that it's important to move away from having classroom rules and school rules to really getting kids to think about the environment that they want to live in. Asking kids themselves, how do you want to feel when you come to school? How do you want to feel in that classroom, when you're in gym, when you're in the lunchroom? And these kids come up with the most amazing words, like, I want to feel comfortable. I want to feel respected. I want to feel safe. I was just in Seattle in a 3rd grade classroom, and one kid, this classroom charter, these kids said, we want to feel selfless. Imagine that. 3rd graders using the word selfless. And I'm a skeptic. I'm a scientist. Like, you got to be kidding me. I went to the teacher and said, you gave them that word, right? She said, honestly, they came up with it on their own. I'm like, they came up with the word selfless. And I interviewed the kids, and this one kid said to me, everybody's so narcissistic. And I was like, what? Like, where am I? But when you give children the opportunity, they can tell you more things than you ever imagined. They can tell you the behaviors that they want to engage in. And they can show you ways that they would prevent and manage conflict effectively. Then we teach self-awareness through our mood meter, so building that vocabulary, learning. How do you get from the red to the green? How do you go from the green to the yellow? What are the strategies? Our third tool is called the meta moment. This is our tool for building self-regulation. How many of you have triggers? Like emotional triggers? Anyone? Like triggers that literally they activate your brain in a way that you turn red and you feel like your head's going to blow up. Anybody have those? Yeah. How many have like 100? We all have triggers. Oftentimes, kids who bully others are triggered through things that don't trigger other kids so easily. Maybe they're misreading a facial expression. We now know that kids who bully others tend to have a hostile attribution bias. They see a neutral face, they say, hey, what are you looking at? Like this guy here, like, are you interested or are you being dismissive? I'm having a hard time here. You got a problem? And that's what happens a lot in that bullying cycle. So what happens also, how many of you ever noticed that when you are hijacked, when you have that amygdala pumping, that all of a sudden you remember everything in your life that you don't like, and everyone who you don't like. And you think about even a relationship you're in, and you go back 20 years, and you say, do you remember when we were on vacation 20 years ago? And do you remember last week you promised to do this? Do you remember this? And do you remember this? And if you're in your classroom as a teacher, and this happens with a student, and I knew I should have left before I got tenure. And I knew it. Like, what am I doing here? Now I'm stuck. This is ridiculous. When is summer vacation? And you go into that cycle. We want to stop that cycle. So we have a 6-step process. Something happens. You sense it. You pay attention, and you think, and you recognize very clearly what's happening in your brain, the thoughts that are going off the deep end. and you stop and you breathe. And you say, wait a minute, I need to bring it down. But breathing is not enough. Because has anyone ever taken that breath and you go, I'm going to kill you. So what we want to do is shift our mindset. And what we've learned is that if you teach people to activate an image of their best possible self, things shift. Things shift for the better. I'd like you to take a moment and think about your best self right now. Everyone, please sit up straight in your seats. Good posture, you'll live longer. Take a nice long inhale. And exhale. Close your eyes for a moment if you're comfortable. And if you were asked, as you were leaving here today, for the word, the adjective, that described you when you were your best, what would that word be? If you're an educator, and you're in the classroom, what is the one word that describes you when you're being the best educator? If you're a parent, what word describes you when you're being the best parent? If you have one word, think of another one. Please open your eyes. And the question I have for you is that when you're triggered, if you practice more and more activating that image of your best self, do you believe that you might choose more effective strategies? How many of you think that might be a possibility? Well, we know it is. That when I say Mark, and I was very fortunate. Students in my class about 7 or so years ago wrote an article about this course that I taught on emotional intelligence, and they gave me the name the Feelings Master. Right? It was like, wow, I'm a feelings master. Probably should button my jacket. And I remember thinking, like, how does a feelings master interact in the world? Right? Better posture. Right? And I get a lot of students, sometimes they're entitled, and they say things like, Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I'm not sure you're going to know the answer. And it's like, really, are you kidding me? Like, have you read that research I've done on, like, teachers' emotions and grading? And I'm about to read your paper, honey. But anyway, I've noticed, even in my own life, that when I'm able to say, Mark, bring that feelings master out when I'm triggered, somehow or another, the feelings master doesn't want to say something hurtful. Somehow or another, the feelings master doesn't continue thinking negative thoughts. Because I've taken the energy away from the object, and I brought it back to myself and say something like, wow, you want to be an empathic person. An empathic person doesn't engage in this kind of behavior. What are those strategies like positive self-talk, positive reappraisal? Of course, we can't always get through the moment. Sometimes we even take that meta moment, but we need to problem solve. We need to find the root of the problem. So our problem-solving tool we call the blueprint, which gets kids away from thinking only about themselves and now thinking about the other. What happened to the other person? What was that person feeling? Oh, I don't have no idea. Oh, really? Maybe if you knew what that other person was feeling, you'd have more information. Maybe it was the other person's strategy that influenced you. So the blueprint not only has them describe what happened, but gives them the time to reflect and think critically about their own emotions, the reasons for those emotions, their own strategies, but also those of others. And we've seen just great things happen. For example, in schools, when they take this seriously, kids will complete this blueprint independently, then they'll switch. I thought you were making this facial expression at me. No, I was looking at the clock because I was bored. Oh, really? I thought you were dissing me. No, I wasn't. Oh, the whole thing was a misunderstanding. And importantly, it's for everyone. So these are some artifacts. This actually, we have guests here from Hamden, Connecticut. And these are charters from Hamden. The first one is from Hamden, the middle one. When we studied every teacher in Hamden a few years ago, asking them how do they want to feel, this is what they told us. They wanted to feel more respect. They wanted to feel supported. They wanted to feel safe, motivated, successful, and happy. And then the teachers themselves think about, well, what can I do to create a community that feels more respectful, where I do support others? This is one in Spanish. in a preschool where the kids can't write yet, so what they did is they used their thumbprint to sign their charter. As you can see, there are a million uses of the mood meter, just a million uses of it. From teaching facial expressions, to building the vocabulary, to developing emotion regulation strategies, to an app that will be released in a few months where you can plot yourself and get reports at the end of every week to show you where you've lived on the mood meter, to using the mood meter in special education classroom with children who can't speak, and they can drag their photo into the quadrant and the computer will give them words so they can actually share their feelings with people that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. We have more advanced work that we do as well. We call it the Feeling Words curriculum, where we teach educators how to intentionally integrate emotions into the curriculum through a process that we use that has 5 steps. The one is sharing stories about your own experiences being alienated. You know, I have my family member, one of my brothers says to me, Mark, you shouldn't be telling everybody that you were bullied, they'll think you're weak. What? It's the only reason why I'm successful. I'm so self-disclosing. It's like, what do I have to show? I feel pretty good about it. I think it's important. I think children that I speak with, when they look at me, they say, "You're a professor. You're a doctor, and you were bullied." There's hope for kids. They have to know that we've all experienced this, and why are we so afraid to be open and authentic? So we want teachers to create those experiences for kids early on, so there's no weirdness about emotion in the classroom. But it's got to be linked to the curriculum. So when you're doing the Holocaust, why not focus on alienation? It's got to be brought to the home so parents can be learning these words, and they can also be sharing their own stories. I'll never forget this one, that word alienation just reminded me of a school on Long Island I was in recently where they had done that word during that 2-week period, and there was they posted their family response, and this one parent was a police officer, a woman, and she wrote a beautiful story with her daughter about how she's felt alienated in her career because she's the only woman on the police force, and how the guys do this, and how she always felt isolated and left out. That daughter would never have known that about her mother had it not been for a lesson on alienation. The creative connection, getting kids to do drawings and other activities to activate sort of the other areas of their brain, where we know that children need to develop divergent thinking ability. It's interesting, isn't it? When you have to solve a math problem, it's sort of like there's a correct answer, right? But when you were challenged emotionally, how many of you ever had like a really difficult experience? And how many of you found there's just one right answer? It's complex. You got to weigh these things out. You got to think, oh my God, if I do this, what's going to be the repercussion? How's this going to impact me? How are we teaching kids to think that way? These are the real world problem solving skills. And of course, we want to give them the skills to be more able to manage their emotions. So we get kids to work in groups to think about a variety of strategies. Remember, children are different. So as the introvert, I don't want to talk to a lot of people when I'm feeling sad. Right? I want to be alone. I want to think about it some more. The extrovert may need to socialize. So we want to give children lots of options because there is not one way to be healthy in terms of managing emotions. I wanted to talk very briefly before I end about the alignment of our work with the Common Core standards. And I won't go into a lot of detail about this, but you can see here that just one tool, the mood meter, across all grade levels through the lessons and activities that we teach is giving kids those skills of speaking and listening and building language, speaking, listening, and reading. Here's just one example. This is a lesson using the mood meter in the Holocaust, where they're reading a book in 5th grade called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And they are doing analysis of the emotions of the characters in the book. They're taking Shmuel and they're looking at Shmuel's experiences. How did he feel when this happened? How did he feel when that happened? What caused him to have those feelings? Where's the evidence in the text that demonstrate that? What was the strategy that Shmuel used that led to this? So they're simultaneously developing emotional intelligence, critical thinking. We're very concerned in Connecticut about teacher effectiveness. Domain 2 is one of the domains that we feel we can help teachers receive exemplary scores on. Why is that? Well, when you have a classroom charter, you're creating a positive learning environment that is responsive and respectful to the learning needs of students. You're promoting student engagement and shared responsibility for learning. So over and over again, we're not thinking about adding something in. We're actually helping you achieve the goals that you want to have to create a positive learning environment where students can learn. Another example with the mood meter. The mood meter is not just for teaching emotion vocabulary. It's actually a tool for differentiating instruction. Don't you want kids to be in the yellow when they're brainstorming, when they're generating ideas? Don't you want them to be in the green when they're doing journaling and reflection activities? Don't you want to teach them how to be persuasive and get in that red so they can be competitive and they can be a good debater? And sometimes you need to be in the blue when you're doing some proofing or editing. So right then and there, we're helping teachers create learning environments where students are more engaged and they're differentiating instruction and giving kids what we call a mood-congruent learning experience. Children will remember more and learn better when the content matches the mood. Same thing with the meta-moment and the blueprint. We're promoting appropriate behavioral standards, giving kids the research-based strategies to help them manage emotions and to problem solve. We have an approach we call Ruler. There are other approaches to social and emotional learning. And my hope is that whatever approach you decide to adopt, and I really encourage you to take, obviously, social and emotional learning seriously, that make sure it has these components. Training for leaders, teachers, and staff, so that everyone is involved in the education of emotional intelligence. That there's a classroom level work, that you're also involving the families. One thing that we spend considerable time on is making sure that the same tools children learn in the classroom, parents are learning to use at home. Think about it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if in the morning a mother or a father said, "Good morning, honey. Where are you on the mood meter? You're in the red this morning? Why? What's going on?" "Well, Mommy, I'm feeling anxious about the test today." "My goodness, you're anxious? Wow. Let's think about some strategies as we go to school together to help you decrease that anxiety." How many of you would like that to happen for your students? I think it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? What we know is that when you involve everyone, you're enhancing social and emotional skills of individuals, but also shifting the culture and climate. A shared language. And finally, what we now know is that great things happen in terms of outcomes. So that's what we're going to wrap up with. We know that schools that have adopted Ruler have students with greater emotional intelligence, less anxiety and depression, fewer attention and learning problems, higher academic performance, better problem solvers. In terms of that climate, we've shown up to a 17% shift in classroom climate. What we show is that the emotional climate is the initial driver of that change, and by the second year, the instructional skills of teachers become even better. So, in conclusion, I'm going to ask you, like I asked you in the beginning, how are you feeling? Everyone, please sit up straight in your seats. Take a nice long inhale. Exhale. How many feel a little different than you did when you came this morning? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are feeling slightly more pleasant? I'm not going to ask the other one. I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute. And imagine that you're going to leave here today and text message someone. And you're going to tell them the one thing that's a take-home message for you about emotional intelligence and social and emotional learning. What are you going to say? What's the one thing that resonates with you from this presentation? Your one take-home message. Okay, please open your eyes. In conclusion, as an academic and our team here, as a team of academics and people who are involved in the practice of emotional intelligence, we can't make audacious claims about our work. We can only say what our research shows and what the anecdotes say as they come in from our thousands of schools now, or hundreds of schools around the globe. But James Heckman, I think, said it best, Nobel laureate in economics. He said, "The greatest returns on education investments are from nurturing children's non-cognitive skills." I don't love the term non-cognitive skills because I do think of emotional intelligence being a very cognitive skill. It's a very hard skill. But we need to give children the social, emotional, and behavioral benefits that lead to later success in life. So my final words are, I hope that we're in agreement that the time has come, at least in Connecticut, to take the social and emotional education of its children seriously. Thank you very much.